I'm excited to introduce our esteemed speaker, Jevon Boyer. Jevon is a certified financial coach and counselor at California Coast Credit Union. As a certified financial coach, Jevon has a unique set of tools to help us understand how we think, feel, and react to money and financial circumstances. Jevon has over 20 years of experience in the financial industry and loves to empower his clients through education. Jevon is active in the communities he serves, enjoys giving workshops, and meeting one on one with members. Jevon has a passion for seeing his clients succeed by introducing simple everyday habits that can change the financial story for yourself and your family. And with that, Jevon, take it away.
Well, thank you very much, Will, and thank you for that warm introduction. I also want to thank everyone for joining us today. We hope to bring you some valuable information about today, specifically about escaping the debt trap once and for all. And for many of us, debt is this four-letter word that keeps us from reaching our financial goals. Debt can end marriages, it can damage friendships, it can completely overwhelm our lives. And too often, we allow creditors to charge us outrageous amounts of money for the privilege of buying something now when we don't have the funds available to purchase what we want or what we need. So, our culture today is all about bigger and better and more. We're consistently being bombarded by advertising that shows us a world where the faster car gets us to a better place, or a bigger house is a symbol of success, and expensive technology is a necessary requirement for daily living. But today, we want to provide tools that can help you manage your finances and put you in control of if and when you decide to borrow money. So I'd like to get started today by asking you a few questions that can help identify if you are currently feeling being trapped by debt or if you may be on the path to being trapped by debt. So I'd like to get started by just kind of quietly asking yourself these five questions. Number one, are you finding yourself having no money in savings? Or maybe you opened up a savings account and you even put money into it intentionally, or maybe you have an automatic payment going to that savings account, but you're finding yourself at the end of the month when emergencies come out, having to put that money right back in the checking to pay bills or pay for an emergency. So that could be a sign that you could be about to be trapped by debt. Number two, if we're using credit cards and they're maxed out or close to their limits, or using credit cards to pay for fixed or regular expenses, this is a big red flag, especially if you're using them for food or electricity, which are necessary things to buy. Now, number four, if we're making minimum payments. So if we're finding ourselves not able to afford more than the minimum payment, it's going to take us a long time and cost a lot of money in the long term to get out of debt. And number five, if we're making late payments, if we're asking to have our late fees refunded or reversed, or even relying on grace periods to delay payments, that's definitely a sign of debt overload. So if you are experiencing any of these right now, please stay tuned to the video. We want to address some of these issues and provide you some resources to help you from not being trapped by debt. So what do we need to know? I always say the first thing we need is awareness. Awareness leads to action, but it's our actions that leads us to success. We need to uncover what causes us to overspend. And this is not a one size fits all answer. Our finances and how we choose to spend our money is deeply personal, and we deserve to give ourselves that gift of awareness. So we need to also know, what exactly are we buying? If you ever meet with us one-on-one for a personal coaching session, the first thing we're going to do is ask you to track all of your spending for 1 month. In fact, going through your last 3 statements is even better. It will let you know exactly how much you spend and on what. And for many of us, groceries and meals out are the areas that we most underestimate. So next, how much do we owe? This is where we need to be honest with ourselves and stand in our financial truth. And oftentimes, when we get everything on paper, we see that maybe our debt isn't as scary as it felt carrying it around in our minds. It allows us to stop worrying about that debt and start working on a plan to escape the debt trap once and for all. And lastly, we need to understand, what is our debt costing us? And I'm not saying all debt is bad. Actually, maintaining a healthy credit score can give us access to almost anything we need. We can borrow money for a car. qualify for a safe and secure place to live. We can even get access to cash in an emergency. It is when we rely on debt to pay for things that we didn't properly plan for. That's when it costs us not only our peace, but also our earnings and our future earnings as well. So let's dive in today. But what causes us to spend and get caught up in that debt trap? Well, there's many reasons, but let's focus on a few of the most obvious choices. Number one is emotions. Have you ever gone shopping to reward yourself for a raise, or went to Vegas after a breakup, or bought a toy for a child because you missed their soccer game? Well, emotional spending happens when you buy something or spend money on something that you don't need as a result of how you feel in that moment, whether you're stressed, angry, happy, sad, bored, or guilty, or any other normal emotion. Number two is environment. So companies use advertising to blast out messages that affect our emotions. Our feelings are bombarded through television, radio, magazine ads that manipulate us into impulse spending. The idea that driving a certain brand car is a simple success is an example of how advertising preys on our insecurities. That commercial saying that you aren't successful without their brand car or whatever else they're selling, stay alert, stay aware. So, our image, your income is not who you are. But that belief is so ingrained in our culture. I mean, I'm sure you heard the expression keeping up with the Joneses. This myth that everyone else has this item, so you should too. This is especially tough when you have children or teenagers and their friends have smartphones or the newest clothes or cars. But those are areas where we need to have a financial conversation with our families, be aware of our income and make sure we're living within our own means. And we are the one choosing how we spend our money and why. Next is entitlement. Entitlement is another reason that causes us to overspend and puts us in that debt trap. Entitlement says, I work hard, so I deserve to go on a nice vacation. And yes, you work hard. But the question we all have to ask ourselves is, do we deserve to spend more money than we've earned? This is another emotion that keeps people trapped in debt. And the last one is habit. And we can actually laugh at ourselves a little bit on this one. Have you ever been driving on your day off and ended up taking the exit that you normally take to go to work every morning instead of taking the road where you want to go? Well, our habits create these neurological pathways in our brains. And if we do the same thing every day after day, our brains begin to take over, creating that habitual path in our minds. So we don't have to concentrate on those activities, freeing our brains to think about other things. So if we're used to the same habit, maybe we buy breakfast at the same place every morning, or buy coffee at the same place every morning, when those habits take over, we tend not to be as cognizant. Now, we've all heard of these things before, but today I want to talk to you about a newer type of habit that we're seeing and how it's keeping people trapped in debt. It's called the buy now, pay later trap. So buy now, pay later is a relatively new form of payment that allows consumers to purchase an item and repay the balance in installments. Maybe some of you have had this or dealt with them before, and unlike applying for a credit card, buy now, pay later loans don't require a credit check. Instead, these programs perform soft credit checks to determine someone's eligibility. Buy now, pay later services are typically not reported on your credit report, and because of this, shoppers may be less cautious when using these deferred payment services to accumulate more debt than they can manage. So we have to understand, if we are using our future money, we're reducing the cash flow for ourselves in the coming months and to use that money for what we want to buy money for. So let me give you an example. You might have 5 different buy now, pay later payments going on at $50 each per month, which means next month you'll have $250 less for other expenses. And if you get caught up with several of these buy now, pay later accounts, your future self will be yelling at you because you think, oh, I can't, now all my money's going to pay these payments, and now I can't put gas in my car. I can't buy groceries, and those things are going to go on the high interest credit card loans. And that cycle's just going to keep happening until we can pay off those buy now, later, pay later loans. So one other factor to consider is that these accounts actually are charging interest and fees. So look at the fine print before agreeing. Also, the newness of these programs mean that existing consumer credit laws may not cover them, putting shoppers at even a greater risk. So we're going to highly encourage you, if this is something you're starting to do for convenience, take a look at all your options before you start with the buy now, pay later loans. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about strategies to additionally curb spending. So let's give ourselves some time. The first thing is take a break, maybe give yourself a 24-hour, 48-hour rule before buying a purchase, especially if it's a large dollar amount. And we also want to create barriers, making it harder to shop. So the idea of removing friction in the retail world has something to do with making it super easy to make a purchase. So for example, if we have our credit cards or our debit cards already loaded on our favorite shopping websites, it's so easy to click and buy things. It's one click away. And I'll give you a little story here. There was a study done where randomly selected participants were offered the opportunity to buy tickets to this highly desirable sold out basketball game. Half the participants were told that they would have to buy the tickets with cash. The other half of the participants were told they would be required to pay by credit card. Those who were told they have to pay with a credit card were willing to pay more than twice as much on average than those people would have who were offered to buy the tickets cash. So in other words, that study showed that participants were willing to pay 100% premium for the opportunity to buy with a credit card. So again, we talk about making sure that we have our credit cards not so convenient to use, that we remove them from our favorite website. So we actually have to go back, enter that credit card information when we want to buy something online. There's also this idea of creating the splurge fund because it's tough to go from 100 to zero. It's tough to go from I buy whatever I want to now I have to live on a plan. So creating a little splurge fund, putting a little bit of money aside when we get extra money, maybe you have a tax refund or cash for your birthday or a bonus at work. Put a little bit in a splurge fund so when you do feel like treating yourself, you have the money available to you and you're not getting yourself further in debt. And the last thing I'm going to say is don't shop when you're in a bad mood. Being in a bad mood can increase impulsiveness and make it harder to control spending. If you're exhausted or bored or depressed or anxious, that's the time, get off your phone, get off your computer and avoid shopping online or even going shopping at the store. Okay, so next let's talk a little bit about what we're borrowing money for. We all have a pretty good idea of what our expenses are each month. We either have them set up on bill pay or we pay them on the due date. But this is not where our debt typically comes in. This is not where we get in trouble. It's the occasional expenses that don't have a due date. Let me say that again. It's the occasional expenses that do not have a due date is where almost all credit card debt comes in. And this is an extremely important reason why the first thing we will do is ask you to track everything you spend. Not because we're being mean, but we want you to understand and have a plan for those periodic expenses. So what do I mean by periodic expenses? When we're talking about periodic expenses, I want you to think about house repairs, replacing household items, any tools, blankets, pillows, replacing coffee pots, kitchen items, home repairs. And then also let's think about the long-term ticket items, replacing a couch, a TV, mattress, washer, dryer, refrigerator. The list goes on and on. Auto repairs. We all have to do oil changes. We need to replace tires every few years. Maybe we have regular maintenance. And of course, just the random parts that need replacing from normal wear and tear. Vacation travel. Think about the last trip you took. Maybe there were plane tickets, gas. Maybe there were tickets to, I don't know, Legoland, Disneyland. Where else did you like to go? Maybe there's souvenirs, there's food, there's vacations, hotel costs. And we're coming up to the summer, or maybe a lot of us have graduation plans to go visit family or go on vacation in the summer. So let's think about how much we want to spend and put that on our plan so we're not putting those things on credit cards. Last is gifts and holidays. This is another big area where we tend to overspend and get in trouble. So let's talk about this for a minute. So we think about, okay, Halloween, yeah, we get costumes for the kids, but we also buy candy and decorations. Christmas, we buy gifts, but we also spend money on a Christmas tree and decorations, Christmas dinner, wrapping paper, cards. Birthdays, the same thing. We think about the gifts, but we don't tend to think about the cake and the decorations and the food that's outside the normal cost of grocery spending. We can see that if we don't have a preset limit for how much we want to spend on these things, those emotions and the excitement and the environment that we discussed earlier tend to take over and we spend more than we plan. We also hear this common argument that yes, we overspend during the holidays, but then we pay off our credit cards with our tax return. If this sounds familiar or you're seeing yourself in that cycle, I want to point something out. This is the exact trap that we're talking about. We know that we are going to spend money on most of these things throughout the year, and we'll never escape the debt trap if we don't set aside the money we need to spend for these things first. And if you'd still like to use a credit card for those things, say for points or mileage or convenience, great. But make sure that you have the money saved first so you're able to pay off that credit card in full. This is the first step to escaping the debt trap. So next, how do we deal with the debt that we already owe? So before we can create a plan that drives down our debt, we got to gather some data to make some informed decisions that fits our unique situation. So go ahead and gather all your creditor statements, all your credit card statements or loans together and fill out information. I like to arrange it something like this, where I have a creditor statement. It tells me I write down the name of the bank or the credit union that I owe the money to. What is my balance? What's my interest rate? And what is my payment? I can easily see my total debt and how much my payments will be each month. Now that we have this information, there are several ways we can handle this. One popular strategy is called the snowball method. So the snowball method uses the balance column, and it lines up your debts from the smallest balance to the biggest balance, regardless of interest rate or payment. And the advantage to this is it allows you to go after the smallest payment first. It gives you that motivation because you say, look, I'm making a difference. I'm getting rid of debt. This credit card's paid off, and it keeps us motivated. There's another strategy, and it's called similar to the snowball, but it's called the debt avalanche. Very similar. What you do is you just simply line up all your payments by interest rate, from the highest interest rate on the top all the way to the lowest interest rate, and you tack the highest interest rate first. Now, long term, this will cause you to pay the least amount of interest. But what we're finding is that it's less effective typically than the snowball method, because oftentimes we're seeing the highest interest rate is also our highest balance, and it feels like our debts are never being paid off. Now there's another option, and it's using that payment column. This one's called the cash flow method, where you line up your debts in order of the largest payment. And by paying off credit cards with the highest monthly payment, you can make more money available to you sooner. Okay, so now we want to dig even deeper. It's one thing to know how much the interest rate is, but we want to know exactly how much of your hard-earned money that you're giving away to interest every month. Again, the privilege of getting something right away that we didn't save for. And I emphasize this concept because as long as we're continuing to use debt to buy things that we haven't saved for, we'll never escape that debt trap. So how do we escape that debt trap forever? We've talked about understanding our finances. We've talked about planning when we use a credit card and planning how much we spend. But there's a few other questions you can ask ourselves. Do we need this or do we want this? Is this purchase helping me reach my goal? And if not, why am I doing this? And simply what's the worst thing that would happen if I didn't buy this? And my favorite is that fifth one, the last one. Is there another way? And I'll share another story with you. I was working with a member, and he found himself in that trap where he made his income and he paid his bills. And whenever something came up that was unexpected, he didn't have that money planned, so it'd go on a credit card. And that was the habit that he formed. So he said, okay, I'm not going to use my credit card. I'm going to put it away. I'm not even going to carry my wallet. I met with him a month later, and there was a charge on his report. He bought a $300 chainsaw from Home Depot. And I said, well, what happened? How come you bought a $300 chainsaw? What happened? He's like, okay, well, there was a tree that was leaning over my neighbor's fence and I had to take care of it. Fair enough. We all have things we have to deal with. But I'm going to ask you the same thing I asked him. Is there another way we could have handled that? And in that conversation, he came up with 3 or 4 other ways just in less than a minute. He's like, oh yeah, I guess the rental center was right next door to where I bought it from. I could have rented a chainsaw for much less. Maybe I could have hired somebody to take care of the job for less than $300 and have to worry about interest and future payments. Maybe I could have borrowed one from a neighbor. So there's all kinds of ways to do this, and I'll leave it at the end of the story. What he did after that, he actually wrote on his debit card and his credit card is there another way? So it forced him to look at that every time he makes a purchase. Okay, so now we have something to work towards. And let's set up a plan. Let's look at the bottom line. When you're setting up a plan, the easiest method to follow is we start with our net income. Our net income is the money that we actually have to spend, the money that actually goes into our checking account after all of our benefits and taxes are paid. So we start with our net income, and then we need to subtract those periodic expenses we talked about. We want to subtract our emergency savings and, of course, our monthly savings that have all the due dates. And when we subtract all that, our plan should be positive. We should have a positive number. So that means when the month begins, we take how much we're going to earn that month, subtract again the periodic expenses, emergency savings, and monthly expenses, and we need to make sure we start the month with a plan to have a positive balance. If we don't have a plan to have a positive balance, we're either going to have to, the money's going to have to come from somewhere. It's either coming from our savings account if we have it, or we're going to get deeper into debt. So we're going to end this workshop by tying it all together. You do have to spend money occasionally. We all spend money occasionally on things. And I want you to go on that vacation. You do work hard. But I don't want you to use the credit cards for the impulse buys. The best way to plan for this is setting up specific accounts. So if we know how much we need to spend, we want to spend on a vacation. We know how much we want to spend, or going to need to spend for auto repairs. We know how much we want to spend on gifts and holidays. Set up a separate account. Here's an example of a few ideas you can have. And at the credit union, we allow you to have as many suffixes as you need, and we don't charge a monthly fee for having multiple suffixes, multiple savings accounts. So here's my recommendation. Go ahead and start tracking for months, see how much you actually spend in these areas, and set up a few savings account to prepare yourself for the future. All right, so today we talked about understanding our debt, overcoming our debt, and escaping that debt trap. I want to provide you a few other resources. So California Coast partners with a company called Enrich, and every California Coast member has access to www.calcoastcu.org/enrich. There's all kinds of tools, articles, resources, and it's not just about debt. Maybe you want to learn about investment. Maybe you want to learn about retirement. Maybe you want to learn about starting a business. There's all kinds of resources that you can use by going to that Enrich website. You can also visit our YouTube channels. I know this video will be posted here in shortly. And with that, I think I'll go ahead and turn that presentation back over to Will. Will, if you want to finish it out for us, we appreciate it.
Thanks, Jevon. That was great. We appreciate all that information. Let me just remind everybody that if you have a question, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Okay, let me see. Am I getting questions? Feel free to either use the chat or the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. So one question came in, Jevon. How can individuals negotiate lower interest rates with creditors to help pay off debts faster?
That's a great question, Will. So the first thing I would do is understand what your credit score is. And typically, the higher the credit score, the less of a risk you would appear to a lender. And they'll be more willing to work with you on getting a lower rate. Now, there's also something called a balance transfer, where maybe you're finding a high interest rate on the credit card you have now. Well, maybe you can get an introductory rate, maybe I know California Coast offers a 2.88% for the first year. And we have something called, we don't charge a balance transfer fee, which is pretty unique in the industry and a fantastic way that we can help a lot of our members lower their interest rates.
Excellent. Another question came in. What are your thoughts on debt consolidation loans? Are there any drawbacks?
I want you to understand the root cause. And I think today's presentation was a lot about where's our debt coming from. If we're just consolidating our debt, but we're still continuing to use the credit cards instead of using money we saved, we're going to have our debt consolidation loan and we're going to rack those credit cards back up. But once we have a plan to put money aside, absolutely. If you find a debt consolidation loan that's you're paying less interest than all those credit cards, absolutely, it's a great choice.
Okay. Um, Another question about strategies for paying down debt. Can you briefly restate the snowball, avalanche, and cash flow approaches?
Yeah, and I'll be happy to go back to those slides. And I think that this slide actually shows it really well. First thing you want to do is you want to line up who do you owe the money to? What's the bank? What's the credit union? What's the store? Next, you want to understand what the balance you have. The third, you want to understand what that particular card or loan charges for the interest rate and what is that payment. So the debt snowball, the idea here is you make minimum payments towards everything else except that loan on top with the lowest balance. So the debt snowball, again, you're going to make minimum payments to every other card, but you're going to attack it and everything extra you have goes towards paying down the loan with the lowest balance. Once you've paid that loan off, that's no longer there, right? Now that payment you would have normally made can go to the next one down on your list, and you can make it even a bigger payment, and you can see your debt being paid down faster. The debt avalanche works very similar, except instead of lining up with attacking the lowest balance first, you attack the one with the highest interest rate first. So that one you focus on the interest column, and you line up all your debts from the highest interest rate to the lowest interest rate. And again, you attack the one with the highest interest rate. The last one's a cash flow. And again, if we're struggling with our cash flow, meaning we're spending more than we're making every month, or we're not bringing in enough to pay our bills, that one, an effective strategy may be to focus on that card with the highest payment. It's hard to make every month. Once we get that taken care of, then we free up more money faster and we have more availability faster. I hope I answered that question.
Yeah, yeah, Jevin, and I just want to mention that in Enrich, it has this very same tool that can help you pay down some of those debts in each one of those scenarios.
Oh,
You just
wonderful.
plug in your interest rates, your amounts that you owe, and then it'll give you strategies as far as how fast you want to pay it down. And so it's a great tool. I would definitely take a look into that inside Enrich. It's absolutely free, so it's a great tool, and it addresses each and every one of those strategies. Another question, how can I get rid of a high auto loan and get an auto loan with a lower rate?
Sure. So the first thing we want to know is what is the value of the vehicle compared to how much you owe? So when you're asking a credit union to let you borrow that money to take on that loan, they're assuming that responsibility for the value. So it's pretty hard to um, ask a bank or credit union to lend you more than the vehicle's worth. But if you do have equity in the vehicle, meaning the vehicle's worth more than you owe on it, and your credit score's in good shape, and your debt to income, meaning that you are showing that you earn enough, more than enough to pay off that loan and satisfy all your other financial obligations, go ahead and do some research. You can go to California Coast, you can go to our website, and we actually have our loan rates right on our website. So you can compare what am I getting, what kind of loan rate do I have now, and what is CalCoast or another credit union offering me? Am I eligible for a lower rate? And of course, if you want to meet with us one-on-one, it's kind of hard to talk specifics about, a very unique one situation. So if you want to reach out to us one-on-one, I'd be happy to take a look at that for you.
Great. Yeah, that's another great benefit of having a membership with CalCoast is that free one-on-one coaching with the financial fitness team. Jevin and his colleagues would be happy to meet with you to talk about your specific situation. Another question came in. How can I consolidate balances when the credit score is lower due to being already at the credit limit?
So if I heard that right, the question was the credit score is not high enough to qualify for consolidation. Is that what I'm understanding?
Well, it looks like because the credit accounts are maxed out.
Okay.
There's nothing available. How do you consolidate and you have a low credit score?
Yeah. So The credit score is all about risk to the lender, right? And if we've seen that you have a lot of credit cards that have already been maxed out, and that's been the history, lenders are going to be very wary and may not even be allowed to lend to you um, once your credit score is at a certain level or your debt to income is at a certain level. So, um, again, I want to see that what the person's talking about one-on-one. I don't want to just give out that information. We may need to work on your credit score and reduce your debt to income, and we can give you those strategies to get you in a place where you can plan to apply for a loan and feel like you could reasonably get qualified.
Yeah, that makes sense. I appreciate that. So then another question came in. If what if what I see in my credit report, my total debt balances, can I start from there or do I track the cards individually?
Okay, so I understand what she's asking or he is asking. Um, when she's looking at the credit report, it's going to say what the balances are. But it sounds like maybe there's more purchases or payments that are being made. So those credit reports, the balances only update once a month. So that information may be a month old. So you're definitely going to want to track your own spending and make sure that uh, how much you owe in your credit report, make sure the credit report is correct. And that's actually how much you owe. So yeah, absolutely start tracking on your own and making sure the credit report information is accurate.
Yeah, no, I agree. I like that. Here's another interesting one. Do you have any general ideas on how couples can attack debt together, particularly if one partner struggles more with debt accumulation or spending?
Yeah, I am so glad you asked. I love working with couples. And yes, sometimes one person is very much more interested in managing the finances, and the other person is not as interested in managing the finances. They also might have different views or bring different views to the table on how to manage money and what they want to do with their money. So if again, if you meet, if you have a benefit of membership is you get to meet with us, and hopefully both people can come together and we can kind of identify those questions, and maybe we say, okay, we're going to let this one person handle it, but we also want to have that list we talked about. So if something happens to the other person knows where to take over. And we also do something called a SMART goal. This is kind of fun. Usually about a third meeting, we have a SMART goals worksheet. And I ask the couples to fill them out individually. And then in the third meeting, we actually share. And the reason we do that is because sometimes it's hard to have those money conversations. You might even feel um, intimidated, embarrassed, threatened. All those are real emotions. So by doing it separately on your own, you can kind of come to the table and we can share, okay, this is my goal with money and this is my goal with money. Where do those things intersect? I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, that was great. I appreciate it. Uh, the other question came in about credit scores. Any tips for increasing the credit score?
I'm sorry, Will, I barely heard that. I think you asked about increasing credit score.
Yeah, any tips, strategies for increasing credit score?
Yes. So the first thing I'm going to tell you is take a look at the credit cards. Credit cards are designed to be paid off in full every month. If they're not paid off in full every month, they have extremely high interest rates. Now, what a lot of people don't know is um, at 30%, once you owe more than 30% of your available limit, so let's say you have a credit card with $1,000 limit and you owe $500. Now you owe 50% of your limit, you'll half. If you can get all your credit cards down below 30% of the limit, you're going to see a substantial boost in your credit. Typically, we see about 15 points on each credit card once it's below 30% of the limit. Now, the reverse is true. If you're spending more than 30% of the limit on your credit card, you're going to lose about 15 points per credit card on your credit report. That's the first thing I would start with. Also, check if you have any collections out there or derogatory marks on your credit. Those are affecting your credit substantially as well. So the first two things I would look at, and again, our financial fitness department, we actually have a credit review service where we go through your entire credit report line by line. We teach you how to read it. If you're already familiar with how to read a report, we give you some tips and tricks to help you improve your score.
Excellent. And with that, I think I had about 5 questions come in about setting up appointments with you, contacting you. How do they go about meeting with you?
And I apologize, Will. I think the volume's very low. I didn't hear what you said.
Oh, I'm sorry. The question is, a lot of questions have come in about setting up appointments with you, meeting with you. How do they go about contacting you about setting
Oh,
up an appointment?
yeah. Yeah, setting an appointment. Thank you very much. So actually, I'll share one more slide. We have three of us on our financial fitness team. My name is Jevon Boyer. Yeli Fernandez is our Spanish speaker, and Terrelyn Rose manages the financial fitness department. You can contact us, you can email us, you could call us. You can go on the California Coast website, and it says request a meeting with a financial advisor, or if you'd like to simply visit your branch and ask more about it, any one of the branch employees can refer you to us as well.
Excellent. And then I've got several questions that are coming in going back to the debt consolidation companies. Number one was your thoughts on them, but secondly, how does it affect your credit score? Is it a good idea to go through a debt consolidation company?
Okay, so the question is a good idea to go through debt consolidation and my thoughts on it.
Yeah.
Again, the reason why we selected this particular topic and we want to present it the way we did is we want to understand what caused that debt. And yes, debt consolidation can be a great tool to help you pay off debt at a lower interest rate. But if we're not understanding our spending habits, how much we need, and having a written plan to put it in place to
Mm.
pay down our habits, we're going to have the debt consolidation company, but we're going to end right back in the same debt. So, and I'll go a little further. So, people asking about credit scores at the same time.
Mhm.
There's different versions of credit scores, and the newest version of the credit score that's coming out actually monitors that and says, okay, if this person is just moving from debt consolidation company to balance transfer to debt consolidation company, are they really paying off debt or are they just moving it around? So I would say it's a great strategy to pay off debt once and for all. But if we're not following our written plan, we're going to typically we end up right back in the same habits.
Great. Thank you, Jevon.